My name's Anna, and if you told me a year ago I'd be living in a house where secrets were as common as the dust particles in the air, I'd have laughed. But here I am, married to the most genuine guy I met back in college, Mark. We've got a daughter, Emma, the kind of baby who lights up the room with her gummy smiles. Mark's grandparents, George and Ellen, are the sort who you read about in feel-good stories. Wealthy, generous, and with hearts so big, you wonder how they fit in their chests. I remember the first time I sat across Mark at the college cafeteria, him with his physics textbooks, and me with my sketch pad. We clicked like two puzzle pieces. A year into our marriage, I realized some pieces were missing, like the whole picture of his family. He never talked about his parents, and I never pushed it. Until today. So, Mark, why haven't we ever visited your mom and dad? I asked casually one evening as we watched Emma on the baby monitor. Mark looked at me, then at the monitor, and sighed. Anna, it's complicated. My mom, she's not the kind of person you want around Emma. Complicated how? I prodded, handing him a mug of coffee. He took a sip, eyes fixed on the steam rising like the ghosts of words he didn't want to say. My mom had me when she was really young, ran off with some guy who wasn't worth a dime. She left me with Grandma and Grandpa. They're the ones who raised me. And your dad? I asked, the question hanging awkwardly between us. Don't know, don't care. He was gone before I was even born. As for my mom, Liza, she's Liza. Shows up when she needs money, then disappears again. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's okay, he interrupted. You should know, especially now with Emma. The truth is, my grandparents are my parents. That's why they're so involved with us, with Emma. They're great people, really. I can see that, I said, smiling at the thought of George and Ellen. They're amazing with her. Just then, the baby monitor crackled to life, Emma's fussing breaking the heavy silence. I stood up, feeling the weight of the family history Mark had just shared. Little did I know, this was just the beginning, and the real weight of the secrets was yet to be felt. Life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs. Just when I thought we had settled into our little routine, the doorbell rang, shattering the calm of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of folding laundry, Emma cooing in her playpen. Mark was at work, and the grandparents were out for their weekly bridge game. I opened the door, and there she was, a woman with a wide smile, her eyes darting around, taking in the scene. Anna, right? I'm Liza, Mark's mother. I was taken aback. Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Anna. Please, come in. I stepped aside, still processing who was standing at my doorstep. Liza walked in as if she owned the place, her gaze lingering on the pictures on the mantelpiece. Nice home you got here. I cleared my throat. Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be great, dear. Black, like my men used to be, she said with a dry laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I went to the kitchen, my mind racing. This was the woman who left Mark as a baby? I prepared the coffee, brought it out, and found her leaning over Emma's playpen. Emma was looking up at her, curious and unafraid. She's a cute one. Looks like Mark when he was a baby, Liza said, straightening up as I handed her the mug. Thank you. She's our little bundle of joy, I replied, forcing a smile. So, how long are you planning to stay? I ventured, trying to sound hospitable. Liza sipped her coffee, looking out the window. Not long. Just wanted to see my granddaughter. And my son, of course. I nodded, not sure what to say. Then, as if remembering something important, Liza turned to me with a more serious look. Anna, I know I haven't been around much, but I want to make things right, especially with Mark. He's all I have. Her words should have been comforting, but they rang hollow. I could sense there was more beneath the surface, but I wasn't about to dive in. I'm sure Mark will be happy to see you, I said. He'll be home from work soon. Liza finished her coffee and stood up, smoothing her skirt. I'll wait. It's been too long. Since that first unexpected visit, Liza had taken to dropping by more often, each time with a transparent eagerness that was as unsettling as a door creaking open in an empty house. Mark, bless him, seemed cautiously optimistic about his mother's sudden interest in family life. I wasn't buying it. One afternoon, Liza arrived just as I was getting Emma down for a nap. "Oh, let me," she said, reaching for Emma with hands that seemed more used to holding a glass of wine than a baby. I hesitated, then handed Emma over, watching closely. "Thanks, Liza. I appreciate the help." Liza rocked Emma with an awkwardness that betrayed her inexperience. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about the past. I was young and stupid. I want to do better now, by Mark, and by you and Emma." I watched her for a moment. "We're glad to hear that. It's never too late to start again, I guess." Mark came in from the other room, pausing as he saw his mother with Emma. "Mom? What are you doing here?" "Just visiting my granddaughter," Liza said, her voice taking on a sweeter tone. "And trying to help out. I want to be involved, Mark. I want to be part of her life." Mark looked at me, a silent conversation passing between us. That's great, Mom. We want that too, don't we, Anna?" I nodded, the word yes feeling like a stone in my mouth. "Of course," I managed to say. "Family is important." As Mark took Emma into his arms, Liza smiled, but her eyes darted quickly to the family photos on the wall, lingering on the pictures of Mark's grandparents. Later, as we sat down for a cup of tea, Liza brought up the topic of her parents. "Your grandparents are still living in that big old house of theirs, right, Mark?" "Yeah, they love it there. It's their home," Mark said. "I was thinking, maybe it's time for a family reunion. It's been so long since we all got together," Liza suggested, her voice casual. Mark and I exchanged glances again. "We could think about it," I said, the unease in my stomach growing. "It could be nice." It was a Tuesday evening, just like any other, with the gentle hum of daily life winding down to its restful pace. Emma had finally given in to sleep, her little chest rising and falling in the soft glow of her nightlight. I was alone in the stillness. Mark was working late again, and the house felt like a quiet sentinel around me. That's when I heard it, the low murmur of Liza's voice seeping through the crack in her door. Curiosity tinged with unease nudged me closer. I recognized the tone, a blend of hushed urgency and frustration one uses when things are not going according to plan. "It's only a matter of time," Liza whispered into the phone. "They're old, and I've waited long enough. The money should have been mine years ago." Her words slithered through the crack, coiling around my heart. This was not the voice of contrition or motherly love. This was the cold calculation of greed. I could barely make out the other side of the conversation, but it was clear she wasn't alone in her schemes. "Mark doesn't suspect a thing. He's too busy playing house and acting like he's won the lottery with that baby and wife of his," she sneered, a sharp edge of contempt cutting through her tone. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This was the woman who claimed to want a fresh start, who had looked at my daughter with feigned affection. I felt a silent fury rising within me, not just for the lies, but for the threat she posed to the world I had built with Mark. I retreated from her door, each step away heavy with a new, unwelcome knowledge. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness around me filled with the echoes of Liza's true nature. The following morning, with Mark still at work and Liza out for one of her unexplained errands, I took a walk into town under the guise of needing fresh air. My actual destination, however, was the electronics store nestled between the bakery and the post office. A small, inconspicuous voice recorder caught my eye, the perfect device to capture Liza's deceit without bringing suspicion upon myself. I spent the afternoon testing the recorder, finding its range, and discovering the best place to hide it. It needed to be somewhere close enough to catch her words, but hidden from her prying eyes. As the sun dipped low and the sky painted itself in shades of dusk, I found the spot, a small nook behind a family portrait on the living room shelf. That evening, as we all sat down to dinner, Liza playing her part to perfection, I felt the weight of the recorder in my pocket. It was a weight filled with purpose. I exchanged pleasantries and laughed at the appropriate moments, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on the task at hand. After dinner, as Mark tended to Emma and Liza excused herself to her room, I slipped the recorder out and placed it in its hiding spot. The red light blinked once, then steadied, a sentinel in the night. Days passed, and each night I retrieved the recorder, scanning through the audio with bated breath. It picked up mundane conversations, snippets of daily life, until one evening it captured exactly what I'd been waiting for. Liza's voice, crisp and clear, laced with venom. "I just need them to sign over the trust fund, then I can get rid of this charade. They think I care about the baby? Please, once I have what I need, I'll be free from all this." My hands shook as I listened. There it was, proof of her malice. With the recorder safely back in its place, I knew what I had to do. I had to wait for the right moment, for the undeniable evidence that would strip away her mask once and for all. A couple of days after planting the voice recorder, I was doing chores around the house while Emma was napping in her crib. Liza thought she had the house to herself. Mark was at work, and I was supposedly out running errands. Quietly, I had stayed behind, a silent guardian lurking in the shadows of my own home. From my hidden spot, I could hear Liza pacing back and forth in the living room. She stopped by Emma's crib, and her voice, laced with disdain, broke the silence. "You're just an ugly doll, aren't you? Another pawn in their perfect little family," she muttered. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room, my voice tight but controlled. "How dare you speak about Emma that way?" Liza spun around, startled, her expression twisting into a sneer. "Oh, the perfect mother has heard me. What are you going to do? It's the truth. That child is nothing but a burden." I felt my hands ball into fists. The effort to keep from shaking was immense. "Emma is a beautiful, innocent child. She's your granddaughter." "That doesn't mean anything to me. She's just in the way." Liza spat back, her eyes cold and calculating. "Why are you even here, Liza? What do you want from us?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Liza's gaze shifted, a flash of panic betraying her facade. I just want what's owed to me. That's none of your business." "It is my business when you're talking about my daughter and my husband," I said, standing my ground despite the turmoil inside me. She scoffed. "Your husband? If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have to worry about my future. I should have never had him. All he's ever done is cost me." The harshness of her words stung, but I knew I couldn't lose my composure. "You should leave, Liza. This is our home, and you're not welcome here if you can't respect us." Liza's eyes darted to the door and back to me. "This isn't over," she hissed before storming out, her departure leaving a trail of tension in the air. The evening of the revelation had arrived almost like any other, except for the tension that hummed through the house like electricity before a storm. We were gathered around the dinner table, Mark, his grandparents, Emma snug in her high chair, and Liza, draped in her best attempt at humility. The clink of cutlery on plates filled the air as George and Ellen, Mark's grandparents, praised Liza's newfound maternal instincts. "It's just wonderful to see you taking an interest in your son's life again, Liza," Ellen said, a smile of relief playing on her lips. Liza beamed, basking in the glow of the undeserved commendation. "Thank you, Mom. It means a lot to me. It's all about family, isn't it?" I exchanged a glance with Mark, who looked as if he was trying to convince himself that this was real, that the mother he had longed for was finally here. "Yeah, family is everything," he echoed, though his eyes didn't quite meet hers. As the main course was cleared and dessert was served, a lump formed in my throat. It was now or never. I excused myself to get Emma a bib from the living room, my hands trembling as they grasped the recorder. With a steadying breath, I returned to the dining room, the device concealed in my palm. "Actually, there's something I'd like to share," I announced, my voice cutting through the pleasant chatter. All eyes turned to me, including Liza's, which narrowed ever so slightly. I looked at Mark, giving him a silent apology for what I was about to unveil. Then, with a click, Liza's voice filled the room, the same biting words from the recording echoing off the walls. "Should have never had him. All he's ever done is cost me." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it. Ellen's fork dropped to her plate with a clatter. George's face turned an alarming shade of red, while Mark sat frozen, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. Liza stood abruptly, her chair scraping back violently. "What is this?" she spat, her eyes darting wildly as she looked for an escape or an excuse. "Tell them, Liza," I said firmly. Tell them how you really feel about your family. Mark finally found his voice, a mixture of hurt and anger. Mom? What's she talking about? What is this? Liza's facade crumbled, her shoulders slumping as the weight of her own words bore down on her. It's nothing. It's not what it sounds like. But it is, Liza, I interjected. It's exactly what it sounds like. You only came back for the money. You don't care about us, about Emma. You said it yourself. The betrayal was stark on Mark's face, a portrait of a son coming to terms with the harsh truth about his mother. Ellen was weeping silently, her hands covering her mouth, and George? He stood up, the very picture of wrath aged, but not weakened by years. Get out, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You are no daughter of mine. Liza looked around, her eyes desperate for any sign of sympathy, but found none. Without another word, she left. The aftermath of the dinner was a quiet storm. Mark and I cleaned up the table in silence, the clinking of the dishes punctuating the heavy air. George sat motionless, staring at the space where Liza had been, and Ellen dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, the remnants of her tears still evident. I can't believe she would say those things, Ellen finally whispered, her voice a fragile thread. George reached over, his hand covering hers. We knew she was troubled, but this is unforgivable. Mark hadn't said a word since Liza left. He was lost in thought, his eyes clouded with a mix of emotions. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I knew he needed a moment to process everything. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, everyone. I thought maybe she had changed. You have nothing to apologize for, I told him, placing a hand on his arm. We all wanted to believe in her, for your sake. George rose from his chair, a sense of purpose ironing out the lines of fatigue on his face. I'll have my lawyer here first thing in the morning. We need to make things right, legally. Liza can't be allowed to do any more damage. The next morning, the lawyer, Mr. Hammond, was as good as George's word. He arrived with papers in hand, ready to amend wills and trusts and ensure Liza's deceit wouldn't be rewarded. As of today, she will be removed from all documents pertaining to your estate, Mr. Hammond said, his pen poised over the paper. Mark nodded solemnly. Do it. I don't want her to have any claim to anything after what she's done. And what about you, Mark? Mr. Hammond asked, looking up. This will mean a significant change in the distribution of assets. Mark looked at Emma, who was gurgling happily in her high chair, blissfully unaware of the gravity in the room. I want to make sure Emma's future is secure. That's all that matters to me. And it shall be done, Mr. Hammond assured him, his pen scratching the changes into permanence. As the lawyer left, Ellen came over to us, her usual warmth slowly returning. You did the right thing, Mark. And Anna, we can't thank you enough for bringing the truth to light. It's not me who you should be thanking, I said, squeezing her hand. It's Emma. She's the one who brought us all together. Mark pulled me into a hug, his embrace a silent thank you for standing by him through the storm. We'll get through this, I whispered. Together. George, standing by the window, looked over at us, a soft smile breaking through. We've weathered worse, haven't we, Ellen? That we have, she agreed, her hand finding his. One evening, as Mark and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he broke the silence. You know, I keep thinking about what happened. I can't shake it off. I reached over, squeezing his hand. It's going to take time, Mark. What your mom did, it left a scar. He nodded, looking out at the horizon. I just feel so foolish. How could I not see what she was really after? You wanted to see the best in her. That's not foolish. That's just you being you, I said, trying to offer comfort. Emma babbled from her playmat, the sound like a balm to our wounded spirits. Mark smiled down at her. At least we have Emma. She's the best part of all this. And your grandparents, I added. They've been amazing through everything. Yeah, Mark agreed. I guess I've always known I was lucky to have them. A few days later, we gathered for a small family dinner, just the four of us and Emma. George and Ellen had regained some of their old spark, the betrayal now a painful memory rather than a fresh wound. Mark, Anna, we've been thinking, George began, his voice steady. We want to set up a trust fund for Emma, for her education, her future. That's very generous of you, I said, touched by their thoughtfulness. Mark was quiet for a moment, then looked up with tear-filled eyes. Thank you. It means a lot, knowing she'll have that security. Ellen got up and came over to where Emma was trying to stack blocks with more enthusiasm than accuracy. This little one is the future, she said, picking her up. We need to make sure it's a bright one. The conversation turned lighter then, drifting to everyday things. The garden needing tending, the car making a funny noise, plans for Emma's first birthday. Normal life, with all its small but significant details. After dinner, as I put Emma to bed, Mark came in and wrapped his arms around me. I don't know what I would have done without you, Anna. You've been my rock. I leaned back against him. I'll always be here, for you and for Emma. We're a team. He kissed the top of my head, and we stood there in silence, watching our daughter sleep. The journey had been rough, the road twisted with deception and hurt, but we had come through it, not unscathed, but stronger.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.